Hello, and welcome to the Remembering and Reenchanting podcast. My name is Sara Jolena Wolcott, and I am your hostess on this sacred learning journey of unraveling, unveiling, and becoming more fully alive at the end of the world as we know it. In this podcast, we offer up to you, dear listener, 3 forms of episodes to support your journey of remembering and reenchanting. First, conversations with amazing people. Second, storytelling. And third, myth casting. In this episode, we're going to bring you a conversation between myself and another amazing, fascinating leader in the areas of remembering and reenchanting. Hello, and welcome to the Remembering and Reenchanting podcast. I am your hostess, Sara Jolena Wolcott, and I am so grateful to be joined today by Robert. Welcome, Robert.
Hi, I am honored to be on your platform. Thank you for having me.
Uh, I was just saying, I met you a month ago, I guess, 2 months, at some point recently, and as I was preparing for this conversation, I was just oh my goodness, there's so much here. I'm now signed up for your Substack, and I'm now I'm gonna get one of the books that you've helped to edit around disabilities and justice. And I am listening to your podcast, Three Black Men, and I'm listening to your Black Coffee and Theology podcast. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm becoming a fangirl.
That's so funny because I'm like the shyest person on the planet.
Did I totally embarrass you?
I love this. Yeah,
Oh, you're shy, but you put stuff out there. You're putting
which
stuff
is an
out
enigma. Um, I think, so there are people, I'll say this. I don't know what intro you have planned, but this is me. Um, there are people who need spotlight. They desire spotlight. And
there.
all of it's not bad. Sometimes people are just like, I have something to say. Rawr. I have never felt like that. I'm like the most reluctant public facing person, which is why it is an enigma that I have these public facing platforms. Um, I have never desired to be in the limelight, but um, I'm less reluctant these years, but still like, ooh. I write because I have something to say. I don't care if one person reads it or 50,000. I podcast as an extension of like the things that I muse. And so, yeah, I appreciate anyone who engages with anything that I write in a generative way. I really do.
And you write about, and you're engaging with things that are tender, and you're doing it from a position of softness. You self-describe yourself as a soft Black man,
Mhm.
and I love that description, because it completely is what I experience with you. Um, and so it's nice. It's so cool when people's self-description matches.
Now that is true. You're like,
Like
you
that
describe yourself as this, but this is
as
not
as
given.
I as right, no, not necessarily, and it's hard to describe yourself kind of, accurately, right? Who are we and who are we in the world is such a hard question to answer. Um, but I it's not but, you're approaching questions that a lot of people, it's hard to talk about. It's hard, and it's hard to talk about what it means to have a disability. And, we're having this conversation whilst I am physically at my mother's house and in the house that I grew up in. And this is the place we moved to this town because when I was 9, I was diagnosed with what we then called a learning disability. And my parents knew that in the, let's just call it middle class neighborhood that we were living in. And they knew the school districts. My father was a teacher. That in the middle class neighborhood that we were living in, the school of that neighborhood was not going to have um, good, let's call it good accommodations. I think that was a phrase we used at the time. And if they moved to a wealthier neighborhood, the school would have greater capacity to have quote unquote good accommodations, both of which were the same accommodations for the state. Like, right, they're all just
Right.
following their
Yeah.
legal obligations as school districts. And my life was completely shaped by their decision to move here, and their life was completely shaped by their decision to move here. And they got, in some ways, like the least expensive house in a wealthy neighborhood that they could, right?
Yeah.
And they always felt not wealthy in comparison to many of their neighbors. And like, so there's this class dynamic about disability, and there's a racial dynamic about disability, and there's um and and it's like, so it shaped my life in this, like, in a profound way, and it shaped my life hugely. And I have a disability most people can't see, right? And when I was by the time I was done with college, and particularly when I was done with high school and went to college, I didn't want to ever talk about it again, because it like so shaped my childhood. And I was so grateful to be free of having to talk about it and think about it and make a gazillion social, practical, everyday decisions about having what we then called a learning disability. Um, I never wanted to talk about it. As in the last few years, I've started talking about it because it's been helpful for other people. So I hear your reluctance. um, and I'm finding how many people need to hear these conversations and need to hear the voices of those who society classifies as being disabled, which is completely a social construct.
Mm.
Um, and my partner also she has a chronic illness, which manifests in ways that some people might think of as a disability. And she doesn't particularly use that term with it, but she said this morning we were talking. She's like, "Yeah, I'm not." She's like, "Usually she said the world gives us able-bodied categories all the time." She says, "Most of the time, I'm working backwards from able-bodiedness into what I need." And she's like, "What is it?" She's like, "I'm so curious. What does it mean to start someplace else? To have your origin and your departure place not be from the category of able-bodiedness?" Um, and she's saying this. I mean, she's saying, like, I think there is a particular, like the way that indigeneity and race plays. It's like a very particular intersection on these things. But like, what is it? I guess I was kind of thinking about that. Like, what does it mean to start not from an able-bodied place every morning?
You're asking me.
Why not?
Okay, I listen, I love it. I so two things are in my mind. One, the idea that naming is political, right?
Mm,
And as long as we exist on this rock floating through space, naming is both political and within that is privilege, right? Um, I think the idea of disability is a construct and it is a reality that we exist in, right? Like, both, um, just as race is a construct, but
mhm,
what y'all think of when you think of the black body when I walk into a room? Though it is a construct, it has real implications
mhm,
that we cannot escape from. Although I wish we could. I'm like, let's jettison all this and get out of here. And so, to that end, and to that day where these constructs will be jettisoned, hopefully, that's why we work in the day and in the night, is to divest from these, is we have to talk about the implications of where we are now and naming these uh, our realities. And so For me, disability isn't a bad word as I seek to reclaim it. It's taken my whole life to claim to feel comfortable claiming that word because there are particular um, implications for Black bodies to and minds to claim disability, right? And so all that, Black excellence is a real thing that we uphold in Black communities, Black resilience, Black girl magic, all these things um, preclude the reality of disability, right? And so whatever we're naming our experience of having impairments of the mind or the body, sure, if we're going to use that word disabled, um, I think there is a way to use storytelling and sacred storytelling as a way to decenter able-bodiedness, right? When I do a lot of my work, I center Black imagination, and the way I do that is not comparing the baseline to anything. So when I speak about spiritualities, I don't center white evangelicalism. Um, it's not that white evangelicalism is not real. I just refuse to center my thoughts around spirituality, around uh, if we're talking about Christianity, we have to include white evangelicalism. We don't. It's not that I'm ignorant. It is a driving force in America. Um, but the world that I am attempting to cultivate, I start from Black ways of knowing, Black ways of being, uh, even the problematic ways of being and problematic ways of knowing. I start there and then I work out, And so when I think about my disabled life, I start from what is true of me and those I know, those pain points, those joy filled experiences, those what it feels like to get a remote position as a disabled person where you've been forced to be in this 40-hour work week and not quote unquote be lazy. I start from those things and then I tell the stories, and so for me, all of that to say, storytelling is a way to decenter able-bodiedness done in a particular way.
I love your comparing it to how do we talk about spirituality and religion. It's such a it's actually like it's such a great comparison. And
Yeah.
certainly in a lot of the work that I do, I never centralize the white Christian evangelical experience. And I can do that in part because most of the people I'm working with are not white Christian evangelicals. That just actually kind of makes it not so hard. So the conceptions of, so for example, like, God as a white man in the sky, some people still have those conceptions, right? They still have, even if they don't consciously think of it, it still shows up for them in the religious imagination. This comes up in
Yes,
spiritual
yes,
direction
yes.
all the time. Like, oh, are you like acting like God is X, Y, and Z, even though you intellectually said no a long time ago to that, if you ever said yes. Um, like it's still present, right? That
Yes.
it's still a present figure in our collective unconscious. And it's like I use the word disability because I don't have a better word really. If it neurodivergence still feels a bit awkward for me. Um, and it still feels awkward and weird. But um, even though I'm really appreciating what it's trying to do, it's trying to do something different, right? But I don't have a better word to describe how my brain works. But I never, and this again, I have to give gratitude to my parents for this. I never see my brain as a problem, and I never see my body as a problem, right? Like I never see it as something that needs to be healed. My brain doesn't need to be healed, and my body could have less pain, but like I want to mitigate suffering.
Yeah,
But like
that's
it's not a
crazy.
right? Like that's the healing is the large society needs healing.
Yeah, can I
Yeah, yeah.
interject with it because you're one, you're hitting on an idea. Yeah, Toni Morrison has this book, Playing in the Dark, Whiteness and Literary Imagination, that I
Mm,
think accompanies everything that we're talking about, right? Because she's talking
mm,
about how the moral imagination, the literary imagination of America was shaped by white supremacy, and how even at our best, we are confined by, a certain type of imagination because of the way in which our literary canon was formed by white supremacy. And so as you're talking about disability, you're like, neurodivergence is kind of, I don't know, disability. And it's because knit within the word disabled are a bunch of big feeling words that may not necessarily belong there, but for most of us, they have been coded, right? So when we hear disabled, I think most people have I don't know if I'd say that, because of what it implies and
yeah.
what the American body, what the human body should be. And I'm using quotes because who made that? Somehow it's like there's the quote unquote normal way a body should be, and there's a normal way a mind should work. And if you're not in that, you do need to be healed. You do need something to help you. And that's problematic, right? I also was thinking part of what solidified me with using the word disabled is because of a strong communal care ethic that I have. And I realized that as I identify it not necessarily because I need it, because I know what's true of my body in my mind, and I'm continually learning, but especially for my Black people that I meet, the Black communities I inhabit, I realize that that naming is solidarity because I want people to enter into a new reality. And part of the way they're going to do that is by renaming and reshaping themselves. It doesn't have to be disability, but so many are caught up in language that implies struggle, conflict, war, toughing it out. And I want to say it's okay to be disabled, whatever that means to you. It's okay for your mind to work a different way. That doesn't, there's nothing wrong with you. And so I want to give you a new name if that is helpful for you, right? Like if I want you to leave something behind, um, and saying, hey, if you've struggled with anxiety all your life, which was me, I didn't know you could get medication for that. I just thought I had to tough it out. Um, the word disability helped um, soften me enough to say I do need simple medication to help with my anxiety, right? And so it's a solidarity tool for me. Is also what I'm thinking.
Mm, mm. I'm hearing it as you're saying that I'm like hearing it as like this kind of complex navigation tool, right?
Yes.
It enables you to go into kind of the Western medical model on
Yeah.
your terms
Yeah.
and enables you to go into the solidarity community care model um, across a variety of different, I don't know, intersectional identities,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And they, yeah, 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 go ahead.
Yeah. I just, what is painful for me is I know people who they have fibromyalgia, they
Mm,
are have chronic depression, they have
mhm,
ADHD,
mhm.
um, arthritis, and this is one person I'm talking about.
Okay.
And in talking to them about their life, I will say, "Would you consider yourself disabled?" They're like, "No, life is hard. Life is hard for everyone." And I'm like,
Mm,
"Is
yeah.
that helpful to you?" That's
Uh-huh.
that's where naming can be. And I notice they're living their life, they're raising their children, they're doing all these things. And in softness, you can't do it all.
Yeah.
And I think where your earlier comments really are sitting with me because I want to work towards the day where we don't need the term disabled to allow ourselves to be softer with ourselves and with one another. We are not there. And that
We
sucks.
and to that solidarity piece, or it's the more I talk about my experience of myself and things that have been helpful for me, um, one of the biggest ones being the extent to which my parents and my father was born legally blind and
Hmm.
then came to see some. He had some seeing abilities, but he was born legally blind. His first 5 years of his life were legally blind, which is like hugely influenced who he became.
Yeah.
Um, and he was very much in, he was always disabled in various ways. The extent to which he saw me as wholly, perfectly, godly formed, you know,
Yeah.
like the extent to which he, from the moment I was born, and like we went through some shit together. I mean, this was not a perfect relationship.
Yeah. No,
Right. So,
listen. Hey,
like,
I get you. Hey.
and he never ever, like, I never experienced any questioning or any doubt that he saw me as like, that there was some part of him that always saw my divinity and always saw the majesty of my mind. And he knew how to work the systems because he had been through them. And it's like, so I can bring a little tiny bit of that when I claim the language, when I talk about it,
Yeah.
like when I use some of these words, when I talk about my own experience, I can use a tiny, I can give a little itsy bitsy bit of that to other people.
I love that.
Um, and it's just, and there's stuff that his mother in particular figured out, my grandmother and grandfather figured out, and my grandfather had what we was severely ill for much of his life. And like this, so this like there's this intergenerational knowledge about how to be differently abled
Mm.
that my family gave me.
Mhm.
And I bet many people's families have given them, right?
Mhm.
Many people have figured out how to walk through the world in a differently abled way.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, does that resonate?
It
What?
does. And I also think there are a lot of like, there's this wisdom, that was passed down intergenerationally that you're talking about. And I think there also is this, to that differently abled reality that you're speaking into. I also think there is intergenerational pain around different
Totally.
abilities that has been
Absolutely.
passed down and compounded. One thing that made me afraid, like deathly afraid, when I began to suspect that I was autistic as an adult, as a recent
Mhm.
adult. I'm 40, so it was in the past couple years that I began to have these sinking suspicions, and my body just was rejecting it. Just even the implication. And what I
Mhm.
realized was everything that I experienced as a child from people who are classified as autistic, um, especially where I grew up, or in Black literature or in movies, those kids were beat. There was physical
Mhm.
discipline. And so the way of knowing that passed down to me is disability is not something any self-respecting person wants. And
Right.
you have
Totally.
to do whatever is in your power to not be that.
Yep.
Especially disabilities of the mind. Um,
Mhm.
no, you need to be normal at all costs. And that terror gripped me. That terror kept me from anxiety medication. That terror permeated even when I knew, no, my mind is different. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, and so I think yes, it's the positive and the negative, right? There's this
Yeah.
positive wisdom that you're talking about that is so rich, and
Mm,
I want our society to go that way, right? I
mm.
want um to the point where you don't have to ask for certain accommodations. It's just knit within
Just fit in.
normal life, right? Like you shouldn't have to move to
I
a
mean,
wealthy neighborhood.
exactly. Almost everything that I got in terms of accommodation, everyone would have benefited from.
Yeah, same. The accommodations I have right now in school are almost sad to me because, yo, every student needs this. I'm a PhD student. I'm like, yo, thank you. And I don't know why I had to prove my disabilities to
Really?
get this. But yeah,
Yep. Yep. And especially because so much of it, I mean, it's so interesting too. I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this. I mean, oh, there's so much to say in what you're just saying too. Like when you were talking about that resistance, that resistance piece, what I immediately thought of is how many people I know in their 70s who have that resistance to talking about what it means to watching their own cognitive shifts,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
it's
some
true.
and like um and how many conversations I've had with my own family, with other people about like, no, like your cognitive ability is not what it was a couple of years ago or a couple months ago. And here's some of the signs. And it's like the more you and the resistance to having those conversations makes it much, much harder to figuring out how to get support and to making some really bad stuff to doing preventative measures because there's
Yes.
some really bad things that can happen.
Yeah,
Like
it's true.
if you don't and like the more you can engage with it, then without quote unquote giving in, right? Without saying like, "Oh, I'm done for." And like I can't do anything because for most people it's not that either. It's not I'm like, oh, let's not use a black and white
Yeah,
dichotomy.
I hear you. Yes, you're right. And I think
But
we can afford to have that vision when when our imagination has been reshaped, right? And
hmm,
this is
hmm,
why at the heart of not just my disability work and disability justice uh, initiatives, in everything I do, I speak about a communal care ethic because it is a privilege to have community that can support you as your body and your mind changes. It is a privilege um, to have people to ask you those questions to help hold your hand as you're speaking to going through different phases of life, phases of um, cognition relevance, right? Like we all need someone to help us, right? And so that's why communal care is so big to me. I could speak about it all day. It's like, yeah, part of the breakdown of what we're talking about with disability is because of lack of community and lack of true support and lack of viewing other humans, to your point, as holy, as divine, as they are, right? Like not with an asterisk. Um, yeah.
I mean, as you were saying, I'm so glad you went quickly into the holy.
Yeah.
um, like as you were saying, I'm like, oh yeah, and that's what we crave. Spiritual
Mm,
communities
yeah.
have that are there in part because in the Christian um imagination, it's very like you had to work at the level of the imagination in order to create this, right? Like you had to
Yeah.
work with metaphors and frameworks and
Mm,
like concepts of what it means to do something like have a morning routine to
yeah.
reshape it so that it can engage with a spiritual community, so it can
Yeah.
engage with like the church is the body of Christ, and the body of Christ is collective.
Hmm.
It's not an individual. It's
Right.
not one person. It's not a pope. It's not a priest.
Hmm.
Um, Even in the old Catholic teachings, it is always the body. And it's always, and the body is always collective. And like you can't have the yeah, it's just
And that
that.
informs how we view disability. At least I do. Like,
Yeah.
I view the body as good, you know,
Mm,
and it's like,
the
and
individual body and the collective body.
yes, both. Yes, yes, yeah, because the collective body is good, and that means, it's sticky when we talk about the individual body because disability comes from a lot of different sources, right? I talk about America as a disabling apparatus. And
Mhm.
so people who have become disabled in Flint, Michigan, and who are continually, there's generational disability being embedded because of the water. Should they be happy about being disabled? Hell no. And I view them as good, and I view their pain as good in the sense of you have the right to express the pain and rage. Um, And I want to hold your hand to give you any support that you need as you express that pain, as you have been faced with a new reality that you did not ask for. But we live in America, that
Mm,
disables the body and the mind every single day. And so while I view the individual and collective body as good, I want to give each individual part of the body the support that it needs, in the
mm,
same way I would a collective body, right? It's like, do you need a
mm.
cane to get around? What kind of support do you need to flourish?
This America disables the body every single day. Like that's just, I feel like that just needs to get like underlined. I'm like highlighting it.
No, you're right.
But can you say a little bit more about that? I mean, you just painted some of it. You just painted us some pictures, but I'm wondering if there's something else that feels right to share about that.
I think I stumbled on calling America a disabling apparatus because I was internally wrestling with bodies and thinking of, I in a lot of my work, I think about bodies and minds, right, tangibly, not just spiritually, like tangibly. What does it mean to
Mm,
inhabit your body and your mind, and so I started, coming across a lot of disability work, especially disability theology work, which I have thoughts on, which you probably need some whiskey for that. But hey,
oh, I so want
I,
okay. All right. Have a seat.
and old fashioned will get my tongue loose. But I started, I was noticing, to your partner's point of view, what's interesting as people trying to construct a disability theology, they were trying to combat able-bodied by going the other direction, but it's not imaginative. You are just trying to be the opposite of what you've experienced. And
Right.
that to me is an imagination. That's a placeholder, which we need, but that isn't where we're going. And so people are like, no, disability is great. It's awesome. Your disability is, yeah, there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with you. And it's like, well, there's
Yeah.
privilege in it within here. And to
Yeah.
something you said earlier, there's class privilege in here.
Absolutely.
Um, Sure, if I'm born without eyesight, how do we talk to that young one as they're growing? Do we tell them that they need to be healed? No. We support them. We say, "Hey, you are good just the way you are." And so many on this soil, America was made through disabling, right? Like think
Right.
about it, like both the treatment of Native American peoples, the treatment of the Africans brought here, it was our power comes from disability. And I think that people have to really think about that. It's like Amazon as a company, um, the power of it is through disabling them workers. They have an amazing insurance policy, um, an amazing healthcare. Why? Because we're making this money on your literal backs, and so the
And
res
insurance is such like this is true throughout in international. I used to work in international development, and so like the role of insurance is this insanely complex thing, right?
yes,
On like gazillions of different levels. And like the need for insurance is because things fall, because in part, it's not just because life requires insurance, it's because we
yeah,
live in a system where the lives that we are living require insurance. Like,
that's it. That's it. Which that is such a wild thing to think about.
it's it's wild and it's tricky and it's actually hard, I think, for people to get there, right? Because like, but I need car insurance. No, you live in a society in which the only way you can survive is by having a car for many people.
Yeah.
Um, and you can't work without a car for many people. You can't, but to drive a car is to perpetuate the overarching dis-ease of our environment, of our planet,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
to fill landfills and to put yourself at a daily risk of
Mhm.
dying.
Mhm.
And there are accidents, and there's nothing you can do to prevent car accidents from happening. That's just that there's a certain percentage of people every day who have a car accident. And we all
Mhm.
take that risk. And the only way to deal with that, to make ourselves feel better, is to have insurance. It's like, no, you live in a society that requires insurance, right?
This
You
is
can't
such
buy a car without insurance. You can't rent a car without insurance.
and my thing to this is to the title of your podcast, Remembering and Reinventing, is it doesn't have to be this way. I really put that before people, and I want it to make us feel uncomfortable. I wrote a piece a couple of months ago that went viral, positive and negative, called "I Do Not Dream of Labor," in which
Mm.
I point by point say that my wildest dreams never, and I mean never, include work. you know and
Yeah,
so so the idea, so a lot of people loved it, a lot of people were like, if you how would we even survive without people working? The fact that you can't,
it's like, really?
yeah, you're a victim. And I realize we're all victims. It's to your point. Well, we can't have a car without insurance because we made society where we wouldn't just take care of the person who had an accident. This is all somebody's dream, all every level of our society. This is a best case scenario. I want people to really, if we're ever to make something different, we have to realize this is a best case scenario.
Mm.
All of it. Buying houses the way you do. Well, we have to have home. Yeah, because it's somebody's best case scenario, not
And
yours.
it's a fascinating moment to have these conversations, in part
Mhm.
because um, I think right in like now in the next couple of years, this is going to continue
Mhm.
because because we created a way of living that in which climate change is an inevitable outcome of us
Yeah,
existing, of
we chose
living.
that.
This was a conscious choice. We've had like as someone who works with history and climate change, I'm sure you have moments of
Yeah,
this too. It's just, like not just that colonization inevitably leads to climate change,
yeah,
but that there have been distinct points in the last 50 years where there has been multiple opportunities to choose a very different path, and that path has not been chosen.
right.
So now everyone's like now sitting in California, surrounded by beautiful, beautiful trees in this very suburban neighborhood, which is like people work their whole lives and multiple generations to live in a neighborhood kind of like the one I'm sitting in right now. And the new city ordinance in this neighborhood is that you have to cut down all the greenery 10 feet around your house, which completely changes. what is aesthetically pleasing. You
Yeah.
can have a whole
Yes.
conversation about aesthetic, which is like
Yes.
interesting in of itself, right? But like people work hard to live in a nature infused environment that's clean and healthy. And because of these larger structural systems that we live in, that space, you can't even do that because the wildfires are so prevalent and so dangerous that you have to actually cut down the trees in the wealthier neighborhoods where people live because there are trees,
Yes.
much less like the neighborhoods that have been paved over for multiple generations and have not had access to clean water and clean air for multiple generations. And it's just like you keep in order like so like the logic and the logic of insurance is one that's like going to come up is coming up more and more and more problematic. And it's like no, but we've created this society in which like the the thing you have to deal with is horrific.
And and there's no easy answer now, that we are knee deep into this nightmare.
We're knee deep into
Um,
it.
part of the work is to dream a new dream and to say, oh, this isn't normal. Like, oh, like
Right.
this is reality, but I do not want this to be normal. And that's part of waking up in the matrix, so to
Mhm.
speak, is to remember that no, this was somebody's dream. Other people co-signed it, and now we're all reaping the benefits of that loan. And so no, we can remember, we can reinvent, re-enchant something new.
Yeah.
And to say that this is somebody's dream wakes me up enough to say, oh, well, I don't want that to be normal. I don't want what you just said to, okay, I guess this is just the way we have to do it.
Right.
No, we don't. And so part of it is dreaming together to say, okay, well, then how do we move the needle? How do we dream a new dream with another baseline? If
Mm.
we're going to create something else. And that's scary work. That is spell casting work almost, it feels like, because you're really doing something that goes against the grain of the way society has been formed. So it's difficult. It is not easy at all.
And it's extremely hard to do spell casting when you're exhausted.
Yes,
And
truly.
it's like it's legitimately hard. And the likelihood of doing new spells is extraordinarily, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's really hard.
It is, no, it is really hard.
It's like, and I'm just, kind of coming to that, what you're saying, like, can we imagine a world without where rest is like much of what people get to do? Like, can we take a small step?
Mhm.
And like, where is for those people who are Christian or exploring spiritual pathways, religious pathways, the invitation there is a profound upside down, inside out invitation. And as I'm very like when you think about what's required to have that collective imagination and that collective imagination, how is that spiritual listening and that mystical listening playing a role for you and in the communities you're in?
I love that question. I love that because I think that is spirit work, right? And so
Mm.
part of reorienting society for me has meant deep spiritual listening for myself. And so in the past, almost two and a half decades, almost every morning of those 2.5 decades, I awake and I listen to myself first, right? Yes, I listen to God, but I listen to myself. Howard Thurman talks about the sound of the genuine within yourself. And part of having a restful listening posture going into my day, I can hear myself well enough to know when I'm in pain, to know when I need support, to know when I need kindness, to know when my body is weak, when my mind feels scattered. If I can hear that within myself well, I can treat you with that same capacity, right? And so this isn't a spiritual discipline for me. I don't categorize it as that, although other people would. This is human work, right? This is holy work. As I listen to, wow, I have this ache within because of, missing out on an opportunity. Because I
Mm,
made capacity to listen to myself, then when I talk to you, and you say, I'm disappointed because I hear you. I can I hear you well enough to know, okay, what do we do shared with our disappointments? And I start from that restful listening place. And it partly is a privilege, but I've had to work. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
right.
there's a
Not
privilege, right? Like,
there is a privilege, but you've also chosen certain things to make it possible.
yeah, yeah, yes, that is so beautifully said. I chosen to live a life where and to forego certain job opportunities,
Mm,
power opportunities to make that as central to my life, to make slow morning central to being able to show up in the world and to love others well. And so, the other thing that I would say to your question is a few years ago, I finally succumbed to my friend Rose J. Percy because she had been recommending this book called Black Imagination, curated by Natasha Marin. She
mm.
had been telling me to get it for like years. And I'm like, okay, Rose, I love you, but it's a lot on the to be read list. And so I finally sat down, and that book changed my life.
Mm,
And I know that feels like an exaggeration, but it's so true. One of the opening inscriptions, um, Natasha Marin created this wonderful volume where she asked all types of Black people, Black trans people, Black queer people, Black spiritual people, Black ever, and she asked them to imagine a world where you feel safe, valued, and loved. And she said, write me something. So there's
mm,
all these little, responses to, can you even imagine that world? And some people, they're they're lamenting. They're like, not even in my imagination could I imagine my body being safe, valued, and loved. Period. I can't.
mm,
Others have to do fiction work, in the volume because they're like, this is so far from my reality. We're gonna have to go there in a spaceship because I can't get there.
mm,
And then, before all of their responses, she says this thing. She says to close your eyes and let the white gaze disappear.
mm,
And that is the portal into the imagining. Okay, well, how do we get there? If you close
mm,
your eyes and that white supremacist gaze disappears, what is
mm,
possible? What type of listening is needed? What type of restructuring is needed? And they're the most beautiful poetic lines from regular people that have really reshaped my whole way of approaching people with empathy, with love, knowing that everyone deserves that world where they feel safe, valued, and loved. So that's
mm.
me.
It's like you had to kind of release that image of God as an old white man in the sky.
True.
It's like wagging his finger at you.
Gandalf has to go. Um,
Ah, yeah, like yeah, and and in order you had to. It's a profound invitation.
yeah,
What is it? I've had it. I once had in my remembering course. I had a group of women, and I often do a visualization about what the Minoan civilization, which was a civilization in ancient Crete that, so far as we know, did not do warfare.
Oh,
Um, and was a peaceful, gender gender either equal or women in positions of leadership. Um, and I often lead them through a visualization of being there, and it's very common that I have one or two people who cannot let themselves go into the visualization, or they have to stay above it and look down, because the thought, and I say, you walk through the streets and you feel safe and your breasts are bared, because most of the clothing they didn't necessarily have shirts on. That's not like a random image, right? I'm taking images directly from our archaeological evidence, and you feel safe without a shirt on or without your breasts covered. And there's something about that image that for so many people, and not only women, um, is so it's so shocking that that world existed at all for any time, much less that we have lots of evidence about it. and and we still have, beautiful pottery and images and evident, like, have so much evidence and that it existed right next to warfare. It existed right next to um, places of much violence, and and people can't go there sometimes
yeah.
because it's too painful to visualize it.
Mhm.
And then other people can go right there, right? And other people get immediately, they see a new ritual for their own life, or a new thing, a
Yeah.
new small practice in their own
Mhm.
life that they can start practicing. And then other people can't go there. And none of those responses is better or worse than any other
Yes.
response. They're all
Yeah.
valid. The not being able to go there, like, that response has protected that person, has helped that person survive.
Yes. That's beautifully said. And yeah, it has helped that person survive. I just think about like that's a survival tool, right? Like how do you survive in a society that is bent on cruelty, on hardness, which is part of why I describe myself as a soft man. Um, because I don't want to be labeled as normal in this society. No, this
Mm,
society has a way of being. And
mm,
so to your point, I love that course and that visual you give them. I think of that, that's a dream attendant, which
mm,
is part of the work that I
yeah,
think that's the constructive work.
yeah,
I sometimes call myself, um, whether I write, I podcast, I speak, I do my academic work, I am a beauty attendant and I want to help those by the hand, like what you're doing in those visual. I want to help us imagine a new world by going to an old one, right? An old
yeah,
civilization. And in that visualization, together, perhaps we can find better ways to exist together. And that's slow, deep work.
yeah.
That's not easy. Um, if I was rich, I could move some things aside, but I don't have that. But what I do have, I can be a dream attendant. I can be a beauty attendant. I can help you say, well, how was it done before where these things weren't normal? You know?
And kind of picking up on the, like, if there was more money, right? Like, thing there. It's like, um I was recently helping co-facilitating a board retreat, and it's for an organization, and it happens that what this organization, kind of one of their core values is cultivating a culture of care. And this organization has a small budget for an organization. It's a huge budget for many initiatives that don't have any budget. So in terms of, like, um,
Hallelujah.
yeah, right. Like I know so many purely voluntary, phenomenal solidarity work going on with no budget. So it does have a small budget, and the one of the things that they've decided to have as a budget item is, and this kind of just came. It wasn't didn't come from a it didn't come it came before the strategic process happened. It just emerged naturally. Is a set amount of money every year that's going to go to when stuff shows up, you're going to get paid even if you can't get paid. So if a parent dies, if you need to attend to a health crisis, if you can't show up to work that month, then you're going to get paid. If you're a contractor and you don't have an employee status, there's a set amount that's set aside. Um, and like this, and it's not quite it's sort of like a community fund in the sense that it can go to any one of the organization or any contractor. Um, so for that to be offered to contractors, as you I'm sure know, is almost unheard of, right?
Truly.
Like
Truly.
contractors get almost no support, and most
Yeah.
people who have any kind of disabilities, like contract work is sometimes the best kind of work because it enables so much more flexibility. And flexibility is essential for adaptability in both climate change. And it's so ironic to me. I'm sure you thought about this. Like the number of climate change adaptation strategies mirror and reflect disability adaptation strategies. They're like completely mirror each other. And it's because, as you say, like, disabling apparatus creates both of them. So they kind of need the same type of response. It's not too surprising. Um, so and it's like it is no mistake that this organization creates this, and it didn't like the organization itself didn't realize this, but like the primary people in it also have something, either a chronic illness or or something that's considered a disability. The founders and the primary organizers, they themselves have all experienced chronic illness, like
Yeah.
significant chronic illness in their lifetime.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm like, yeah, so it's not too surprising so it's like, and they could just create it
Yeah.
because they saw it was needed. And it
Yeah.
was actually extremely easy for them to create it. It wasn't
Mhm.
hard. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Of course we're gonna have this budget item that they made up their own title for it as creative people.
Hallelujah.
They didn't need an outside consultant telling them to
Mm.
do it. And
Mhm.
she's like, oh, our people need this.
Yeah.
Of course we're gonna do it. Duh.
Mhm.
And it was like, I'm like, oh yeah, like we can change what our organizations do. We can change what institutions do. Um, we can shift the norm, what's considered normal.
We can. I have a friend who, to your point, talking about a culture of care. I have a friend who has been sending me $50 a month since 2020,
Mm.
just out of the blue, just started. And, he marked it, this is for your dreams.
Oh, wow.
It was humbling. It was strange. I was like, oh, this probably will last like 2 months, like this is random. I mean, I wasn't mad at it.
Right,
I
right,
said,
right.
bless me. It's become normal.
Yeah,
Every month I get, I'm like, wow, what is in your imagination where this is normal to support
right.
a friend in this way? And he's not rich. And that's the other thing that's so humbling. It's like this was part of something from within. And it's like, no, you need support in this way. Go ahead. $50 a month, period.
Hmm.
It's
And that
almost
makes
5 years later, right? That's a lot of $50.
that's very beautiful.
Yeah, I want that to be the ways that we show up for one another, where we might not be able to change the whole policy of the government, of, you know,
Apparently, we still
yeah,
don't have universal health care.
my, I, America, beep, I need the whiskey. No, I just think, like, what would it be when the space between you and I
Mm,
filled with support and
mm,
kindness?
mm,
And it's like,
mm,
that's just normal. Oh, child, here's $20. You know, just put this away for something. There's no, it's not even because of an emergency. What if we
right,
got there? It's like,
right.
oh, you exist. Go ahead and take this $100
Mm,
because you woke up this morning. Go ahead. And it's like, what if we, that doesn't have to be a rich person doing that. We can
right.
do that in small ways for one another. We can give each other the gift of kindness. And that reshapes imagination.
The receiving, yeah, just to underline what you just said again, I feel like I keep on feeling myself using these terms of deep study and attention to the words you're using. Um,
Hey, I appreciate it.
like the um, practicing receiving
Mm,
and receiving not for the not it reminds me of those early Protestant conversations about grace, practicing receiving support simply because you are here
yeah.
is a does change the imagination. It
Mhm,
does. It
mhm,
changes how what we think is possible. Like
mhm,
I when my partner went from working 12 hours a day um to make it, right?
mhm.
To and then because of the pandemic, she got un she was able to get a good unemployment, and she
Grace.
effectively lost her job because of pandemic stuff. She could have gotten it back later, and she could rest for the first time in 20 years of having her chronic disability, chronic illness.
Yeah,
It changed her whole life. And
yeah,
then she went on when that kind of, what do you call it? When it when the government support ran out, which she knew it would, and she had no illusions.
yeah, yeah. We live in America.
Yeah, right, right. There was no illusion that the government was going to continue supporting her. And then and then she got support from a different place. And then that ended. And then she got support in a different way. And then she got support in a different way. And like now, 4 years later, she has a level of trust that maybe it's going to be okay if she rests,
Mm,
And it's like, and she tells this story all the time. Like this is a
yeah.
story that she tells like all the time.
Yes.
So I feel comfortable sharing this story. But like,
Yes.
and it's like just because trusting it in our society, trusting that you can listen to what you need and you can rest is um resting being one of the biggest things that many people need. That is the thing that enables the dreams
Mm, yeah.
to arise. Like literally,
Yeah.
literally that's where dreams come from. It's from actually
Mhm,
having time to sleep.
mhm. Yeah. Mm, yeah.
And that's where God, like in again, I mean not in both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. It's in the rest, it's in the retreats, it's in going into the wilderness, it's in the desert, it's in the dreams, it's in the walk that the burning bush can arise.
Yeah. I love that. I think, you know, I would love to get to a place where, usually I experience when someone says the word rest in a room, I can usually see bodily interactions with that word.
Right.
Some people, when I even mention something restful, I will watch tears well in people's eyes. I
Do you
will
see
watch,
resistance too?
yeah, I do see the resistance, right? And so
Yeah.
there's different bodily reactions. I see some people get tight. I see
Yeah.
some people's breathing get labored. Others, there's this range of actions. And I think even that word, I think our bodies, our body minds know this is not what we were meant for, in the way that, that we exist. And so I would love to get to the place where rest is beyond recovering from capitalism, which is often we can't even get to rest in the same way I think of I'm a creative. I don't want to only think about racism. I want to think about the beauties of
Right.
complexities of
Yep.
race. I want to think about, yes, it's a construct, but racism is not the only thing I want to talk about. It's exhausting.
Right.
I don't, I'm a victim. I don't want to talk about that. Rest is, yes, we are resting from capitalism. But there's a whole world unknown outside of even recovering, right? Like, what
Mhm.
does rest look like when we actually put capitalism to death? Which
Mm.
is my biggest goal in life. Like, put this thing down. What does
Mm.
rest look like when you're not, you know, I don't have to clock in right now.
Mm.
That
Mm.
deeper
Yeah.
rest is where I want every single person to get to.
Is it possible? What happens? Like, does that make it so hypervigilance is not the go-to?
Yeah. I believe I am naive. I'm soft and I'm naive. I'm naive enough to know that there is something beyond recovery. That,
Mm.
like, hypervigilance is not my portion. I don't believe that it should be for any human being, period. Full
Mm.
stop. And so what is that life beyond hypervigilance? Um, some people in that tussle, they're like,
Mm.
well, who would take care of us? Come on, let me hold your hand. We
Who will
will.
take care of us? And
Not
like,
billionaires, I can tell you that.
although
We're
there are lots of places where those who have more money can give support to these
true,
initiatives. This is,
true.
yeah. That this, and if you are listening to this and you have extra, if you have in the millions and billions, please do feel free to talk to me about some places where that can go because I have very concrete suggestions. Um,
It's extremely concrete. Hallelujah.
not theoretical. Very
Yeah.
concrete recommendations. Um, but yeah, and to recognize how many. I mean, I as someone who does hang out with and know some millionaires. Oh, honey, you need to rest too.
Yeah.
Like, stop. You don't have to let the money game consume you, no matter if you have millions or if you have hundreds.
Mhm.
Don't let You are not your money, and you do not have to let the money game
Mhm.
dictate your ability to sleep at night, right?
Mhm.
And that I've seen that happen many times.
Mhm.
And it's just and like that not knowing if you have enoughness.
Mhm.
You know, when you ask, I always love thinking about how in both the human breath and in ocean waves, there's a pause between the in breath and the out breath, between the wave coming in and the wave going out. And that the waves always usually go in a cycle of three, like a kind of smallish, medium, bigger wave. And then there's like a pause. And it's just everything about the ocean has these like pauses in it. And the vastness of the sea, there's these rhythms. The cycles of life are rhythms of pause, um, and then there's always another wave.
Yeah. Mm.
I'm kind of curious as I think about that, or we think about the ocean together. What what stirs for you, and from the with the ocean.
I like that imagery of the ocean. And I think, you know, one 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 thing outside of the ocean that I want to mention is the reason why I mention billionaires and say
Mm,
that they're not going to save us is because I want billionaires to have an opportunity to be saved as well, right? Like
exactly.
like every single person has dignity because of existing, right? I would love for every billionaire to be able to live in a world where they can let go of their 40 businesses and their,
Mhm.
and everything that they've done to amass this wealth. I would love them to rest too.
Yeah.
To your earlier point, I want them to
Yeah.
to enjoy the rhythms and the waves, right? And so, um, I think, as I imagine the pulse of the ocean. I think what it always invites me to, because I didn't grow up around an ocean,
Mm,
um, it invites me into this idea that the world is really large and I'm a small part in it.
mm,
Um, and that is freeing, right? Like I am a part of something that's very, very vast. And because I'm small doesn't mean I don't have significance. It's just the
mm,
reality of, there is this entire ocean out here with life that I can see and not see, right? Things that I can't perceive, and there's a depth to the ocean that I will never, ever, ever, ever get to. Um, that's beautiful. I
mhm,
think, in what that does is it humbles me because I want to do my part to be a part of, what the ocean is signifying to me. That there are so many different creatures interacting to make up this thing called the ocean. And everybody's doing their part.
yeah.
You got everyone's doing their part. You got the catfish somewhere, doing what they do. Right. Um, yeah, so there's a beauty, there's a unity in what we call the ocean, but there's a diverse beauty within in a unified organism, so to speak. We call it the ocean, but there's like billions of creatures in there, right? So it's beautiful.
Mm. Life teems with diversity.
Yeah. Mhm.
Mhm. Well, as we bring this conversation to a pause dash close,
Mhm.
um, I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you want to share about in general, anything else you just feel you wanted to highlight or give a shout out to.
Mhm.
And if there's anything around remembering and re-enchanting that you want to offer before as we bring this session to a close.
Yeah, I'm so grateful again for this conversation. Yeah, I love generous listening conversations. It's
Mm,
part of why I podcast.
mm,
People also getting to experience it, awesome, but I benefit from listening and conversing deeply, right? And so there's that. I think to the remembering, I think something that's important to me and is part of my morning ritual, I do a lot of remembering.
mm,
I sit with even the triumphs of my loved ones. I
mm,
literally will just take time. I usually listen to nature sounds or piano melodies in the morning, and
mm,
I'll be like, wow, he really did that. Or look at them, they overcame this. Or I'll think of
mm,
something that I'll eternally be grateful for. I grew up extremely poor.
mm,
And so most mornings you'll see me crying over like a cup of coffee because it's like I have the agency now to have food in my refrigerator every day. I'm in my own apartment. I do not take that for granted. And so I reflect on where I came from. Um,
mm,
and a whole host of things have merged an ocean, if you will, to
Mm.
get me to where I currently am. And I remembering that makes me one of the most grateful people that I know. Um, yeah, so that act of remembering makes me um, weepy,
Mhm.
grateful, and I'm like, I do not take for granted that I have books all around my apartment. I have books everywhere. Places I shouldn't have books, it's just books in there. And but I was the kid who couldn't afford the Scholastic Book Fair. I was a kid that never got to order books in class because we were poor. And so now my life is filled with books and they help me remember where I came from and where I'm going, you know. And so, yeah, so I offer that. Reflection can be, um, it can be a beautiful thing.
You know, when you say that, I kind of just made this connection, which I don't know, like quite. That's something about the way you said it helped me make a different, a new, I kind of put a piece together in my mind about um that collective care piece, that mutual
Mm,
care, mutual aid piece. That part of enabling, part of what it means, which is what we hope a sangha or a church community can be, can have that kind of care within it, right? That's, I think that's one of the dreams that many different religious communities have for themselves, that they can be places of deep, deep, deep mutual support and mutual care for each other. Frequently that doesn't happen, but sometimes it does. Um,
yeah.
and that like part of enabling that and part of being part of that is really taking those quiet moments with ourselves to engage with that kind of remembering that you're talking about.
Mm, yeah.
That nothing here is that this whole life thing and our ability to participate in it at all is a bit of a game of chance,
Yeah.
and that we get to do whatever we get to do, and lift up for another day and wake up to another day, um, without with anything that was, I don't think it's guaranteed to us.
You're right.
Right? But helping that mutual, like that, those two things seem to get connected, right? Like your ability to, and just, I guess maybe let me frame it as a question, like how do you experience the connection between that morning prayer time or that morning deep gratitude and then the rest, like those other moments in your day when you're actively engaging in this community of care.
Yeah, because I think, you know, that they're both working in tandem, right? Because
Mhm.
community care helped me to get where I am now, right?
Mhm.
Like, you know, I talk about the friend who's given that $50. I know so many helped to get, it took my whole life to get out of poverty.
Mhm.
Um, Even 2 years ago, like
Mhm.
being born into poverty can be, it is almost impossible to shake. Yeah, I did not pull myself up by my bootstraps, I guess is my answer to your question. And so
Mhm.
I have friends who I'm eating cereal for dinner and they give me $10 to go get something. I
Mhm.
get, you know, here's a Chipotle gift card. All of those little acts of communal care. You know, the friend who gave me, here's $50 out of the blue, $100 out of the blue.
Mhm.
Get yourself something. Oh, I bought you a book here.
Mhm.
All of those have the force of that has recreated my whole reality. So when I'm sitting in the morning, I'm sitting atop all of these kind works, all these
Mhm.
good communal works. It's not, Robert was not smart enough to get out of poverty. I
Mhm.
really want to say that. So I am reflecting because I know it wasn't my own genius and my hard work that got me out of here. There's so many people who work harder than me that are still poor.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so then when I go throughout my day, that gratitude just creates such space within to perceive people, to see others and how I can be that blessing too, because I know I didn't get here on my own. I am I'm a school project. There's many the people that attributed to this group project, and I'm proud of who I've become and who I am
Mm.
becoming. And so I want to aid in others, regardless of um, beliefs, spiritual beliefs, regardless of any. I want to help make people be able to have some semblance of a life that they are working for and cultivating. I want to help in that as well.
Mm. I feel it from you. I feel you wanting to participate in all the little ways in each other's lives. I feel that from you. And, I want to give thanks to your community for the support they've given you, um, and for enabling this moment to also be possible, and for enabling your voice to be rising and shining, and for your rest to be rising and shining, and for your ease to be rising and shining, and falling and deepening, and all the ways it might.
Ashe. Amen. I received.
Yes. Well, if you've enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as I have, you might want to do what I am doing, which is to follow Robert's Substack and to participate and hear his poetry and your beautiful conversations and the multiple, like, I feel like I keep finding more of your, like, oh, you have another podcast. Like, they just keep showing up. And there's so many ways of engaging with this collective care, and these inquiries, which are some, like, it's very exciting. I love some of these inquiries, and we're in such a precious moment, and so much gratitude to you and to all those who are part of that community of care. So thank you to all of you and all of your ancestors.
Amen. Thank you.
I look forward to talking with you soon.
Yeah. Amen.
Thank you so much for listening to the Remembering and Re-Enchanting podcast. If you are enjoying what you are hearing, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. I am always happy to hear from you, dear listener, to continue finding ways to connect the disconnected and go deeper on your own journey of remembering and re-enchanting with your communities, your organizations, and your families. I invite you to check out our courses and other community offerings via the Sequoia Summit Via website. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Though I must admit I spend much more time working with really amazing people than crafting social media. If you want to work with me one-on-one or bring me to speak at your organization or family office, you can find out more at sarajolena.com.